Hi and welcome to this video, and in this video I'm talking about wind, and you can see on the screen here in this section here there is a windsock, and this is a track editor object which can be put into any new track that is built on the latest version of VelociDrone. This windsock will basically show you what the wind strength is in the scene. But also, if you don't have a windsock in the scene, which would be the case for any track that's been built before this particular coming patch release, then you can see the wind miles per hour up here on the UI. So it will always tell you what the wind speed is up here. You won't necessarily be able to see the direction, but then in real life when you're flying and you've got the goggles down, you can't necessarily tell which way the wind is blowing from anyway, so it's not really any different to real life. You feel what's going on, and basically in the sim you feel what's going on as well, so it mimics the way real life behaves. However, if you really want to know which way the wind is blowing, then a windsock is one way to do it. Another way to do it is flags. Now, our implementation of wind in the new release is coming in a couple of phases. The first phase has the wind implementation, so you can turn on the wind. It works cross multiplayer and all that kind of stuff, and you can have windsocks in your tracks, but you won't see flags getting blown by the wind for the direction of the wind. That's coming in a later phase of the wind implementation. In the first phase we've just got the wind, the ability to change it, the fact that it goes over multiplayer, and the new windsock object that you can put into new tracks so you can see what the wind is doing. Okay, so that's the kind of the quick overview. In terms of how you change the wind, you go into change scenery and track, and you'll see that there are some new sliders for controlling the wind. And if I just turn the wind on to say 10 miles per hour, this is miles per hour, click OK, you'll see that my windsock now starts getting blown by the wind, and my quad will also be affected by the wind. I'm not going to fly the quad in this particular scene or this video because you feel the wind basically, and I can't show you what the wind is doing because you basically feel it when you're flying, so there's no point in me flying around because you just won't be able to tell what I'm feeling on the sticks. But you can see what's happening on this windsock, and hopefully that will allow me to kind of explain what the different settings are doing. So you can see this windsock is blowing at 10 miles an hour at the moment, and you can see that the wind is varying a bit as well. It's not a completely steady wind, it's changing. So if we go back to our parameters, you'll see that there is a strength parameter, there is a turbulence, a gust frequency, and a wind direction. So we'll do the simple one first, which is direction. This is in 360 degrees. So if I was to add 90 degrees to my direction now and click OK, you'll see the wind swings around 90 degrees. So that's the simple one. The more complicated ones are turbulence and gust frequency. So this is quite a comprehensive wind implementation in that the wind runs on a gradient from ground level and is stronger up high. So when you set the wind strength, you're setting it effectively at ground level, but it will be stronger the higher you go, because that's the way wind tends to work. There is also another parameter that we set internally in the sim which takes account of what type of terrain you're in. If you're in a city, if you're out in an open field, if there are lots of trees around, that kind of thing, we change the way the wind is being simulated. It may be a more turbulent wind if there's trees and buildings, but if it's a completely open field in the middle of nowhere, it could be a much less turbulent, more steady type of wind. But you can still change that turbulence and even more, or adjust that turbulence with the turbulence feature. So what turbulence does is it basically controls how swirly the wind is. So if you turn the turbulence up, you get directional changes in the wind because of the turbulence and the swirling. If you turn it down, you get a more unidirectional wind without that swirliness. The gust frequency is how often the gusts come. So if you turn it up to 1, then the gusts will be very frequent all the time, and if you turn it down, then you'll get a wind that rises very, very slowly and then falls off very, very slowly. So you'll get kind of can kind of think of it like a sine wave, like a continuous sine wave, and if you turn it down towards the low, then you get a sine wave with not very high peaks and a long way apart, and if you turn it up, then you get high peaks and those peaks are very close together. That's kind of a good way of thinking about gust frequency. So if I turn the gust frequency right down here and the turbulence right down, what we should see is that we get a much steadier wind. So you can see that that windsock now is really not bumping around very much, and it's just gently rising and falling with the wind. And if I bring my gust frequency back up but without turbulence, you'll see that we're now kind of moving up and down. The frequency of it moving up and down is increased. And if I bring the turbulence right back in all the way up, you'll see that windsock start really kind of swinging around. You can see that there are direction changes already occurring at the top here, and that the changes due to the turbulence are much larger as well, and you can see it kind of swinging around due to that turbulence. So that's what those parameters do. As I say, it's multiplayer enabled, so whenever you set the wind, it will go across multiplayer and people will get exactly the same wind whilst they're flying. It also tries to sync it up so that the gusts all occur at the same time, but of course that much depends on the network latency and how long it takes for your message to get to the other people in the multiplayer session. So it could be very slightly out of sync to other players, but it does its best to try and match it up so you get gusts and all that kind of stuff at the same time. Okay, it goes up to 40 mile an hour wind, which is extremely strong, and also the other thing to note is that is the mean wind strength, or the average wind strength, so the gusts will be higher. So if you set it at 40, you're going to be getting gusts up to 50-60 mile an hour. If you set it at 10, then you may be getting gusts up to 15 mile an hour. So it works on a kind of a scale, but you're setting the average wind speed, not the maximum wind speed when you set this value. So let's bring it down to say 8 miles an hour, bring our turbulence and our gust frequency down to kind of here, and this is going to be your kind of typical bit of wind, summer's day, nothing too complicated to fly in, but you will feel the effects of it. It will liven up the environment, it will take away that kind of dead air feeling that you get in the sim, make it not feel like you're flying indoors, but that you're in a dynamic environment. But it's not going to be blowing you away either at 8 miles an hour. And you can see up here you've got the indicated 8 mile an hour wind speed, and of course that also works across multiplayer. So if your race manager changes the wind speed, you'll see the change up here, so you will always know what the wind speed is in the session. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything to do with wind, and I'll see you on the next video.